Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. And in this video, I want to look at the chart of Conor McGregor, UFC champion fighter. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button, please, if you can, and subscribe if you have not already. All right, let me share my screen. Oh, sorry about that. Alrighty. Conor McGregor, Irish professional mixed martial arts fighter. He's a UFC champion, featherweight and lightweight double champion. First UFC fighter to hold UFC championship in 2 weight classes simultaneously. Now, I'm not like a huge UFC fighter. I don't even know the difference, I guess, weight, but I don't know how you can qualify for 2 different weight classes. I guess if you're under a certain weight, then you can, if you qualify for, I guess, featherweight, then you're still qualified for fighting in lightweight, but it's probably harder. I'm guessing that's the way it works, right? Because you're fighting people who are heavier than you, in any case, or bigger than you, rather. I guess. He's the first to hold UFC championships in 2 weight classes simultaneously. He's the former Cage Warriors featherweight and lightweight champion. I guess he thought pretty well of himself because he went into professional boxing to fight Floyd Mayweather Jr., who I guess apparently is undefeated, and he lost. He's the biggest pay-per-view draw in MMA history, having headlined the 5 highest-selling UFC pay-per-view events. His bout with Khabib Nurmagomedov, Nurmagomedov at UFC 229 drew 2.4 million pay-per-view buys, the most ever for an MMA event. His boxing match with Mayweather drew 4.3 million pay-per-view buys in North America, the second most in combat sports history. So that's a lot. McGregor was ranked as the world's highest paid athlete in Forbes 2021, earning a reported 180 million. That's a lot. And all right, reported income 99 million. All right, let's move through this. Born in Ireland, and he played football, began boxing at age 12 to defend himself against bullies, and he commenced a plumbing apprenticeship. That's what he should have been, a plumber. No, I'm just kidding. And then he met Tommy again and started training in mixed martial arts. All right. He obviously started as an amateur and won, and then he went professional, and then he won some, lost some, but overall he did quite well and became a champion. I'm not going to go over the details. He became a champion, UFC featherweight. All right. So he signed on to UFC. So you have to sign on to the UFC, apparently. I'm not sure how it works. And then Dana White, I guess, is the head of the UFC, and he signed on to the UFC, and he won a bunch of times, lost sometimes, won sometimes. Or no, he didn't lose initially in the UFC. He became a champion, and in 2 classes and 2 weight classes. And yeah, he won a lot. He became a big fighter. And then he lost to Nate Diaz, another fighter. And he rematched Nate Diaz and he won again. I mean, this is all like, basically, who cares? He won some, he lost some. Basically, he won a lot. And then he started to lose. All right. I mean, this is not the most detailed coverage of his career that you've probably heard, if you've heard any. All right. And then he's tried to retire a few times, and then he did retire. He's a trash talker, which is important for his astrology. And he wages psychological warfare against his opponents. He admired Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee. And he fought against Mayweather and lost. I guess he was considered primarily a boxer or a striker, so he thought he'd try fighting professional boxer, and he realized that, wow, they're actually really good. Okay, he has, let's see, 2 sisters. He's married with 3 kids. He trains in Reykjavik, which is in Iceland, which is why, I don't know, but he does. In any case, he's Catholic. He likes football. Seems like a regular Joe Schmo. Not very awake, probably. He's got some endorsements, whiskey, brand, fashion partnership. I mean, oh, who cares, right? He's got a pub, was targeted with petrol bombs. He was cast in a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Roadhouse. Okay, cool. What's interesting about Conor McGregor is that there's a lot of off the screen, off the fighting cage offenses, with driving. He's got a bunch of speeding tickets and arrests. And then he's got this volatile temper. And he just, like, he just goes around, like, fighting people and throwing things and getting himself arrested. Incident at Bellator. And he jumped in the ring of his friend's cage match, MMA match, before it was officially over, and then he, like, pushed the referee around and stuff like that, like prancing around like an idiot. He threw, like, some metal stuff at a bus out of one of his fighting opponents. This guy, Nurmagomedov. Sorry, Nurmagomedov. Say it right. Another incident where he's, like, punching people, sex assault allegations, beating up fans for, like, taking photos. This one's hilarious. A Dublin pub assault. He wanted to buy this guy a shot of whiskey, and he declined repeatedly. So Conor McGregor punches him. I mean, that's hilarious. Like, oh, let me buy you a shot of whiskey, friend. No. Let me buy you a shot of whiskey, friend. No. Like that. That's exactly how it happened, I'm sure. Corsica arrest, Good Fight Foundation incident, altercation with Machine Gun Kelly. Machine Gun Kelly, if he lives up to his name, he has a machine gun, so I probably wouldn't punch him. I'm being facetious, obviously, but all Conor has is his fists, which are pretty dangerous, but Machine Gun Kelly has machine guns, so you gotta watch out. And then this guy. So obviously he's got a fiery temper, we know that. And let's find out why. All right. So somebody challenged me a little bit on another video where I said that Cancer wasn't a sign that relates to athleticism. And I partially give them credit because Cancers are tough. I'll say that they're tough because they have that Cancerian shell, which is like an exoskeleton, which protects them. And these they can be good brawlers, good fighters. However, I will also add, Cancer is not very quick, and it's not necessarily athletic, right? especially you can't go by one sign anyway, no sign. You have in every different, there's lots and lots of athletes, and they're all going to have different sun signs, every single sun sign. So you can't just be like, well, cancers make good athletes. No, I mean, it doesn't make, sometimes yeah, sometimes not, right? But Cancer as an archetype will not be necessarily quick or necessarily athletic, but tough because of the shell, right? They have that protective quality. So good for fighters, I would say, being like brawler types, right? Yeah, Mars is debilitated in Cancer, and Mars in Cancer can be quite violent. So there is that, right? I would say Mars in Cancer can be very passive or very fighty and loving to fight, violent. But in any case, so he's got his Sun conjunct Moon in Cancer. So Moon is very strong here. And again, so then the Cancerian archetype is very strong. The third and fourth house, because it's the IC and the third house cusp. So there is that shelled protective quality, very physical. Fourth house deals with homeland. So he's a good representation of the Ireland, the Irish. The Irish are known for fighting and drinking and short tempers and being explosive. So among many other things. I mean, I'm not dissing the Irish. I love the Irish. I love Irish music. I love the whole Irish culture. It's very fascinating, very beautiful, right? But they do have that archetype, that stereotype, I should say, of drinking and fighting, which, I mean, he's a perfect representation of that. I'm not going to lie. I mean, stereotypes are often wrong, but sometimes they're right. They don't get the stereotype for no reason. But you can't go around basing things on stereotypes. That's the catch-22. It's always ignorant if you do, because you're going to be wrong a lot of times. Any case. Yeah, so Sun conjunct Moon is also interesting because it's the Sun is going to blind the Moon. It's a new moon, right? So that does give a very spiritually quiet kind of time, kind of energy, which is interesting for a fighter, and there's other reasons for that, but it's not the most social combination. Moon is very strong in Cancer, obviously, but it's not super strong conjunct the Sun. So it's really interesting the way this works. Sun is dominating the Moon, but the Moon is really hiding in the background, ruling the show. If this is his parents, Sun being the father, Moon being the mother, the Sun is kind of like pretending to be the leader, but the mother behind the scenes really is the leader. Right, you're not seeing her, but she's calling the shots. And it is in the fourth house. So he has very, parents are obviously very strong influence. His culture, his roots, his foundation, being Irish, being, homeland, home culture, all that, representing homeland. As well as the third house, right? And third house being skills of the hands. Obviously, for a striker, boxer, that's going to be very important. Mercury is here. Mercury as well, ruling the hands, the intellect, the communication in the third house. So already you can see that the third house also for movement is very important because short distance travel, right? Running around the ring, moving the body, right? That's going to be important. But not a but. Third and fourth house are really strong here. And so fourth house, the other aspect that is also the physicality as well, because brick and mortar, right? So obviously his personality is becoming like brick and mortar, very tough, right? And that is, again, the fourth house Cancerian archetype, right? Part of it, you know, like for example, Michelangelo had the stationary stationary, I think it was an exalted stationary exalted Venus in the fourth house, right? And so sculpture and architecture sort of thing, right? That's going into his art. But for somebody like Conor McGregor, he's becoming the statue, right? Obviously, there's going to be other factors coming in there, but like his body is becoming very, very hard and tough, physical, brick and mortar. Mercury in the third house is going to be very verbal, but the aggression really is coming from this Mars and the square to Mercury. That is very mouthy, very, very argumentative. But I don't want to move too quick. Let me backtrack a second here. Sun is ruling not a cusp, but this ruling the fourth whole sign house. Moon is ruling the third whole sign house, but the fourth cusp. So you can see that's an interesting combination. Very, very strong fourth house influence. Mercury is ruling the fifth whole sign house. Wait, yes, it's the trine house and the fifth cusp. So Mercury is very much pulling in the fifth house influence of entertainment, fun games, children. He has children, creativity, performance, so stuff like that. So he is bringing in a lot of performance, entertainment. Fifth house is excellent for sports, as well as sixth house. So yeah, and South Node is here too. So early on, you can see there's going to be a lot of attraction to the sports realm, the fun, the games, the movement. Fifth and the third will indicate like, well, I mean, it could go different ways, but the entertainment going into the intellect or the skills of the hands in this case, movement, you know, short distance travel, right? Driving incidents, yes, right. So yeah, driving, he likes to drive, especially with the square to Mars and Aries. But yeah, so also mouthy, right? And then what else? Sorry, second house, right? So second and fifth, Mercury. So wealth too, his resources going into the third house of skills of the hands and short distance travel, intellect, things like that. Chiron is also here. And you know, I wonder if Chiron, I didn't read this in the Wikipedia, and I don't really know, but I wonder if Chiron conjunct Mercury is causing some sort of learning difficulty, because Chiron, especially when badly aspected, square to Mars, can indicate something that is wounded or difficult, challenged in a sort of outcast way. That there could be some issue here regarding his Mercury in the third house. Obviously, the way he communicates with the square to Mars that's an issue. I mean, that's certainly not winning him too many friends, or at least with certain people, but causing trouble, difficulty for sure. But I wonder if there is something. I don't know, right? I don't know, but I wonder. In any case, intellect, communications, issues around that, for certain. Obviously, his ascendant is in Taurus, ruled by Venus. Jupiter is here. And actually, let me go back to the moon. There's actually a really nice mutual reception between Jupiter and moon. Moon being exalted in Taurus, Jupiter being exalted in Cancer. And you know, there's a lot of UFC fighters. Conor McGregor stands out among pretty much most of them. I mean, there's some popular ones. If you're into it, you're probably, very well familiar with a lot of them. But even if you're not into it, Conor McGregor kind of stands out and makes a name for himself. Big part of that is that this mutual reception between Moon and Jupiter, because Moon and Jupiter really love each other. They're a really good combination to have something either conjunct in a good sign or trine, or here we have it's a sextile, it's a wide sextile, but also the mutual reception. Jupiter exalted in Cancer, Moon exalted in Taurus, right? And Moon's also in domicile in here in Cancer. So this Moon wins extra points, right? First of all, being domicile, not great conjunct the Sun, I will say that, but being in the fourth house, fourth quadrant, in any case, not fourth whole sign, domicile, and then mutual reception with Jupiter, which Jupiter gains directional strength in the first house as well. So it's a very strong Jupiter, very strong Moon, not without its difficulties, being combust the Sun. And any planet that's combust the Sun is subject to burnout, and during burnout it becomes weakened, and that can be occasionally if he gets overly agitated, I would say, or overly charged up. If he gets too heated, if the Sun is getting too hot, then it's burning the Moon. Any planet that's combust the Sun will have that ability. I know for myself, I have Sun conjunct Venus, and I do suffer that same thing with where occasionally I become, the burnout period where that Venus is just combust, and it's like irritable and nasty, and like it's really hard to. That's what happens when Sun is combust a planet. So there are times where he loses it. He becomes overly, too hot. The ego takes over. The Sun is the ego. The Sun is the pride. Becomes too prideful, too egotistical, right? But other than that, this is excellent. Moon trine or sextile Jupiter with the mutual reception. Jupiter, both in really good positions. So very, very strong here, Moon and Jupiter. Jupiter also is excellent for physicality. First house being the body. It brings Jupiter ruling Sag. Sag is the philosopher and the teacher, the religion, the higher mindedness, but it's also a warrior. Sagittarius is a warrior. Sagittarius is the centaur, right? But really it's about a man on riding a horse with a bow and arrow, right? That's the warrior. It's the image of a warrior, guy on a horse, hunting, right? So that is associated with Jupiter. So Jupiter's no slouch, right? And Jupiter on the body will give a strong body, especially in Taurus, strong, very physical, bully body. Jupiter is ruling the 8th house and the 11th house. So 8th house is going to, among other things, 8th house certainly has a lot of difficulties with it, being the house of death and rebirth. That's not so great, but 8th house does bring in a lot of power and control and domination. If he's having an 8th house influence in his first house, Jupiter's going to mitigate some of the negative effects of the 8th house, but the 8th house itself is going to want to dominate and control, right? It is like I said before, it is a house of a heavyweight, even though he's a lightweight physically, or a featherweight, or whatever, welterweight, whatever. I'm not talking about the weight class. I'm talking about the energy that it brings. It brings this energy of wanting to dominate and wanting to have power over others and control others. So it's very intense in that way. Jupiter is going to make it more benefic, right? Especially with this, very strong combination here with the moon. But nonetheless, it is going to bring that power and control. Also note that moon and sun are sextile the ascendant. So that combination is really good, the sextile. And yeah, Jupiter here is going to really give a good strong body and the tendency to want to dominate. It's also making him very popular, moon, in mutual reception with Jupiter, right? That's probably why I'm covering his chart, and he draws such a big draw into his fights, like, record breaking, millions of people want to watch Conor McGregor fight. Jupiter on the ascendant, in mutual reception to the moon, and the moon's also in domicile. That's a really excellent combination here. Very, very popular and successful. Jupiter brings great success. Jupiter makes it like a very, the ascendant is going to affect everything. So Jupiter conjunct the ascendant is going to really create a person who's, very big and positive and will probably be successful in many ways. Venus is in the second house. Venus in the second house brings money, especially if it's, in good aspect, doing good, right? It's the ascendant lord, and it's also ruling the sixth house, right? So, competition, fights, conflict. Sixth house is often, fifth and sixth and third, often play into sports and athletics and competition and stuff like that. Venus is a very physical planet, so certainly not bad for the physique. Gemini actually is wonderful for moving around, and this represents his body. So, don't think Gemini does not play a part in somebody who's going to be a good fighter. You need the mutable energy, right? Because you never know where they're going to be next. That's the unpredictability factor. And mutable air is the most unpredictable. You're not going to get any more unpredictable than Gemini. Gemini, in fact, it's part of Gemini's nature to be unpredictable, because the reason is that Geminis love, they're like the butterflies of the zodiac, and they love to keep their interest alive, right? They get bored very easily, so they're constantly searching for something interesting. What's interesting is the thing that's never been done before. That's why you cannot predict Gemini's movements. It's the unpredictability factor. And if somebody has, their ascendant lord or in Gemini or Mars in Gemini, they will move in very unpredictable ways, and that's excellent for fighting because you'll never see it coming. It's like, whoop, you thought I was there, but I'm over here, and I'm all over the place. I'm a whirlwind. I'm mutable air. You can't find me. That's the sort of thing that Gemini brings to fighting. It's very light. It's not the heavyweight. It's not going to pack the power or the punch. It's float like a butterfly. That's the Gemini element. That's what it brings. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. If Venus is in Gemini, it's going to float like a butterfly. It's going to be all over the place, and you're never going to see it coming. You're never going to guess what's next. And it's lightning quick, right? As far as Gemini obviously rules the mind, so it's going to be but Venus is representing something physical, so it is the quickness of thought, not the quickness of action necessarily, but the quickness of thought ruling something very physical. So obviously the thought has to be there before the action is. It's also square the nodes, exactly. So you can tell that first house, the body, sixth house, competition, is going to be something that he has to do. That's destined, to be done, because first of all, South Node is activating Mercury, and he's still young, by the way, 1988. That means he's only 34, I guess. So his North Node's not even fully activated. But yeah, Mercury, so third house stuff, right? Skills of the hands, short distance travel, mouthiness, and second house in Gemini. So ascendant Lord in Gemini. So money, but also physicality and competition, right? Venus in the second is great for money. And the square to the nodes show that he has to resolve this in order to, because the North Node is a compulsion. It's an obsession. You have to move towards the North Node, right? From the South Node to the North Node. That's the direction that everybody's life takes. If a planet is square the nodes, you have to face this before you can fully resolve the North Node. So it's like an obsessive. Yeah, it's like a, if you have a pipe with water pressure and there's a clog in it, you have to resolve the clog before the water can come out the other end. And that's the square to the nodes. It's something they have to work at and achieve and fix and resolve before the water, the energy can come out the other side of the North Node. So this is his body. This is the sixth house of competition, and it's the second house of in Gemini of resources and value. This would be self-esteem. So he's also like, he has to value himself, believe in himself, build up his own self-esteem. Venus is very indulgent, luxurious, right? It's also fair and balanced, but it brings in the Taurian value, this money, right? There's issues here around self-belief, self-esteem, valuing himself, believing he can do it, and that's important, like, especially if you're going to be like a fighter, you have to go in there believing that you can fight. And actually, one point at least said in the Wikipedia, he was going to quit MMA, and his mother came in to his rescue because he lost the fight, and talked to his coach or whatever or something, and like convinced, I guess, I'm not sure of the details, but in other words, stepped in on his behalf and got him back into the MMA. So there was an issue around self-belief, self-esteem. At one point he's like, I can't do this. This isn't for me. This is too difficult. I'm going to go back to plumbing, right? I'm going to be a plumber. This, Venus in the second, which is all about self-esteem, money, valuing yourself, right? He had to deal with that, and he had to overcome his doubts, because you got to believe you can be a champion if you want to go into MMA. Otherwise, why do it? You don't go in there thinking you're going to lose. So that was an issue for him. And it's part of his destiny, big part of his destiny. Right. So now Mars in Aries, this is 0 degrees Aries. You have to look at this, right? That is about as fighty as it gets, because, well, look at the squares too, but just this alone. Mars in Aries is a fighter. Mars is in domicile in Aries at 0 degrees Aries. It's even more so, because it's the baby. It's the Aries. 0 degrees would be the beginner. Aries is the beginner. Aries is the baby. Aries is the number one, numero uno. And at 0 degrees Aries, it's like the full Aries. This is the time of year. This is the spring equinox, right? It's the time when the energy is just rising up into the new cycle, right? Very, very powerful Mars. Extreme temper. I was going to say temperature. Extreme temperature and temper. Temperature is hot. temper is hot, right? Very fighty, very aggressive. Mars and Aries, you don't want to fight Mars and Aries because Mars and Aries energetically, obviously he has lost some of his physical fights, but energetically, they won't stop, right? Like, I mean, my Mars is in Leo, so there's a lot of pride and ego with Mars and Leo. But I don't want to fight Mars and Aries. I will outlast Mars and Aries because Mars and Aries is quick burst of energy. Like, they don't waste a second. They will just, like, without even thinking about it, because it's that single pointed focusness. Mars and Aries will just punch, right? Without even thinking. It's punch first, think later. That's Mars and Aries, right? That should be their motto: punch first, think later. And you don't want to be on the receiving end of that punch because it is a hard punch. I've dealt with it. I know. I lived with a Mars and Aries. Of course, a fixed Mars will outlast them, and that's what you can. That's the way to win. Is wait till they calm down, then you can maybe have your way. But avoid that punch, dodge that first punch, because they don't waste time in punching your face. And I mean, Mars is ruling the 12th house and the 7th house, right? So his personal relationships, this is one-on-one. This is, other people, punching other people in the face. I mean, that's Mars in there. Racing, mouthing off, being a assaulting, kind of verbally assaulting, verbally dominating, verbally striking people. I mean, that is very much indicated here. Being very argumentative, being very feisty, fighty, mouthy. Mercury is in the 3rd house. It is a crabby Mercury, meaning it has a hard exterior shell, plays the tough guy very well. He is a tough guy, very mouthy, very, very, very fiery. And then not only that, Saturn and Uranus, mind you, square as well. And that is out of sign. It's in fellow warrior fire sign Sag, but it's still square. So this is very fiery. And Mars square Saturn definitely has a tendency towards violence. Saturn is not good in Aries. So Saturn's influence on Aries is it's one of debilitation. Saturn in Aries is quite the tyrant, right? Quite the dictator. Saturn being the authority, the structure, leadership. It's brittle, it's fiery, and it's just too forceful. Mars square Saturn in this fire sign. I mean, Mars and Sag is fine, so it's no problem there. But Uranus and Sag square Mars, that's so explosive. That, again, that's like, that's not even punch first, think later. That's punch before the first. It's like, even before it's punch before the first. It's like, like intuiting the punch before they even insult you or something like that. It's crazy. It's like, it's not even wasting any time. It's like quicker than the snap of a finger. He's just explosive, right? Exploding with anger, exploding with ferocity. And it's tied into this Mercury, even though, again, out of sign. But it's extremely, extremely fighty. It's in the 11th house, so 11th quadrant, but 12th whole sign house, which is interesting. That does happen occasion. Mars in the 12th becomes very, very aggressive or extremely passive. Guys, I have to pause for 1 second. Sorry about that. I had to pee. Okay. Yeah, so if we're talking about the 12th house, then definitely some foreign things are coming into the picture. Foreign fighting foreigners, fighting in foreign lands. So definitely, and even trains in a foreign land. He trains in Iceland. So definitely foreign thing, and isolation as well. training alone, training, in quiet, isolated, foreign, exotic places, things like that. Let's see here. Mars ruling, so his relationships are also going to suffer. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's been able to keep his marriage as well, but definitely there's a lot of personal issues around relationships. Having to deal with, fighting, arguments, and all that. Scorpio in the 7th house, always, just generally speaking, also loves to dominate other people, loves to control, dominate, especially with Pluto and Scorpio here. I mean, this is 6th, 7th influence, because 6th quadrant, 7th whole sign house. So the 6th, the competition, the fighting, the having a sense of there's in the 6th house, there's a sense of being an underdog. Versus 8th house not being an underdog, being somebody who is used to dominating and controlling. And Pluto and Scorpio also have the opposite nature of power, control, domination, right? So there's this combination of fighting as an underdog, but as well as knowing that he is the dominant, powerful component, wanting to retain his title, his dominating effort, his dominating force. Pluto loves, it's also the mastermind. It's going to bring in elements of strategy and psychology, right? He's going to try and psychologize through absolute terror, through his mouth, right? His opponent, that's really interesting. It mentioned that in the Wikipedia, the psychological abuse, psychological terror. He's a real terror, right? He's first he'll terrorize you with his mouth, right, and his anger and his ferocity, and then he'll punch you in the nose or the jaw or whatever it is. Let's see, Saturn, and obviously I said this. Mars square Uranus, that's explosive rage. Mars square Saturn, also very extremely combative and violent, and fighting against authority, any perceived authority, referees, judges, whoever, people taking his photo, guys at the bar who he wants to buy a drink for, basically anyone who doesn't do what he wants them to do. Saturn is ruling his MC, and I guess this is 10th whole sign house, right? So it has a huge influence on his career, very explosive, independent career. When Saturn and Uranus are conjunct, it definitely has an Aquarian vibe, right? Because these are the co-rulers of each other. So like very unique within a structured format, right? Unique within the group, unique within the people. So he has a very Aquarian public image, let's put it that way. Somebody who's unique, but is also thinking about the sort of norms of society. Uranus conjunct Saturn can go either way. They can explore both sides of, Saturn being the rules, the authority, the structure, Uranus being the rebellion, the independence, the uniqueness, the kind of brilliance of mind, and the social political awareness. It's very, you can see the angles here are kind of very off balance. MC is in the 9th whole sign house, so he's a Catholic, he's religious, very normally religious. I mean, that's Capricorn. right? And wanting to just keep things as they are. That's very Saturnian. Not Capricorn and Saturn are not progressive signs and planet. But it's in the 9th quadrant in Sagittarius, but it's in the 8th whole sign house, so that is a bit interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's certainly not exploring his Uranian side as far as religion, philosophy goes, as far as I know. That hasn't really woken up for him. So I tend to think he's a bit more on the Saturnian side of things. Uranus requires a certain amount of, evolution in order to really embody. Otherwise, it's going to be externalized. And I think this plays more into the physical realm, this Uranus, because it's just making him very, as far as like his physicality, it's making him an explosive fighter, relating to the square with Mars, and explosive anger as well, as we've seen. But as far as like, Uranus in the 9th would indicate a very radical philosophy, radical religion changing, but he's not doing that, at least as far as I can tell, right? And then it's probably dominated by the Saturn. He's probably much more Saturnian. Jupiter is also playing into that, and it's bonifying this actually, because Sagittarius, right? In conjunct, yes, but he is probably getting a lot out of his Orthodox religion. And yeah, I mean, he probably just wants to keep it that way. What's interesting? He's had a bomb attacking his bar, and I think that somehow ties into it, because Uranus is conjunct the MC Lord, and Uranus is bombs, especially Uranus square Mars. That is definitely a sort of kind of like terrorism combination. And so this Uranus is externalized, I think, more so for Conor McGregor, in that he's meeting, sort of sudden events or accidents or explosions in his career, in his public image. Yeah. And but overall, Jupiter is going to help this a lot, and probably makes him, have a good relationship with his religion, with his philosophy. Neptune, it's in the 9th. Yeah, this is also somewhat in the 8th, I have to admit, because it's in the 8th quadrant, 8th whole sign house. So that is interesting. I think I was reading it as 9th, but perhaps more 8th. Neptune definitely in the 9th. But conjuncting, I mean, it is conjunct the 9th cusp. In any case, Saturn in the 8th, it can be difficult for a lot of things, but again, this Jupiter is helping out a lot. And I think it's bringing in a lot of, difficult situations into his life, and making him, all those conflicts that he had, all the altercations, all the violence. I think that does have to do with this, unfortunately. Saturn conjunct Uranus square this Mars in Aries. Very volatile, very the 8th house can bring down somebody's reputation, put a cast a dark shadow upon their life. Neptune in Capricorn is definitely going to be, that's going to have an orthodox, I think that fuels his Catholic sort of belief system, because the orthodoxy, Neptune is imagination, Catholicism and Christianity involves a lot of imagination. Sorry, religious people, but it's a very storified religion. So yeah, that's the way I read that. Neptune, Neptune conjunct the MC, it's pretty wide conjunction, but that is good for show business, for any sort of, if somebody has to play a fantasy role, which he does in part. The fighting is real, it's not fake fighting, but there is an image of, public image. He has to cast a reputation for himself as being some sort of, bigger, larger than life fighter, and that Neptune definitely helps with that. There's a nice sextile to Pluto, and that helps also with his image, with how the public perceives him, and also translate into his religious beliefs. Very, very deep, passionate. I think that he's probably very religious. Yeah. Pluto would intensify that. Neptune has a sesquisquare to the ascendant. That is, first of all, delusions are, there could be potential for delusional thinking, but and that's probably not so good for this combination of the violent rhetoric, the violent tendencies, the altercations, the getting into fights, and getting fined, getting sued, ruining his reputation, all that. Public image is a bit mixed, I gotta say, with the ascendant lord definitely pulling in a strong 8th house. It's modified by this Jupiter, like I said, again, so it's mixed. It's good and bad, but definitely he has some developed some bad reputation going on. Yes, Mars and Jupiter seem to be okay. There's a light sextile there, and that's good. That's healthy for the physicality. Jupiter and Mars, both very fiery planets. Jupiter doubles as physical as well. So yeah. Let's see here. So moon is a bit out of bounds. So his emotionality can be overly extreme, if you will. Out of bounds planets, they push the envelope, they push the boundaries, they go further. So being emotionally, and emotionality again is not good for Mars, because Mars is debilitated in Cancer, so that's where the violent extremism comes in. It's much better if he can control himself, behave in really dignified, strong, Saturnian, because Mars is exalted in Saturn, sign of Capricorn. So if he can maintain that Capricornian control, self-control, he'll do much, much better. Yeah, he really gets into trouble when he loses control, becomes overly emotional. When that burnout happens, when that moon goes to the extreme. Yeah. And I also mentioned, like, for driving, that's this square, 3rd house, Mercury square, Mars and Aries. Mars and Aries love to go fast. Aries is the physically fastest sign, physical speed, and especially with a square to Uranus, that's just very explosive, but in an aggressive, fighty kind of way. What else? I think Mercury Mercury opposite Saturn. Again, not so great for this 8th house. Mercury does not do well in Sagittarius, so it's not quite opposite because it's the signs, but still it's close enough that this is not, Mercury is not helping things. Mercury opposite Uranus, that is also going to be, again, with the mouth, with the explosiveness, with the argumentation, with the sharpness of tongue. So in any case, let's take a look at his draconic chart. Let's see, Ascendant and Jupiter in, so Jupiter is, also in the 2nd house. So for money, definitely excellent. And Jupiter is going to expand the physicality of Venus, being the ascendant lord. Jupiter conjunct Venus here. So yeah, excellent for self-esteem, for self-worth, for making money, and for being physically well developed. Jupiter is going to benefit that, right? First, it's in the ascendant, and then in the draconic, it's in the conjunct the ascendant lord. Right? So strong Jupiterian influence, bringing a lot of success and benefic qualities. Still more Cancer activity. Mercury still in Cancer along with Chiron, but then Sun and Moon move to Leo, and Sun gains strength in the draconic. So really strengthening the ego, strengthening the showy quality, right? Showing up in front of the camera, ego, pride, show business, entertainment, being full of himself, pleasing the crowd, all the Leo stuff, having the spotlight on him. Still in the 4th house, I guess. Yeah, pretty much. 4th quadrant, and yeah, fourth whole sign. So very much in the 4th, right? The sun's a lot stronger here than the moon in the draconic. And then Pluto in Scorpio, very strong domicile in both draconic and ascendant, right in the 7th. Really wants to dominate and control other people, right? Really unhappy if people are not doing what he wants them to do. I mean, he's just like, and just so you know, have an idea, Jim Jones, the leader of the was it Jamestown cult, the Kool-Aid guy, Pluto in the 7th. I'm not sure if it was in Scorpio. I can't remember. I want to say yeah, but I can't remember. No, obviously not. It was before. It wasn't in Scorpio. I forget what it was in. Maybe Cancer. Okay, Cancer. Maybe Leo. Maybe Leo. Any case. Yeah. Definitely wants to manipulate, psychologize, control over, obsesses over, that kind of thing. Masterminding others. Yeah. Pluto is the most intense planet. It's not necessarily the most physical. It's not physical, but they want to psychologically dominate other people, especially in the 7th in Scorpio. All right. Saturn is in Capricorn in his draconic, which is excellent. Because he needs that. He needs that Saturnian control to rule over this Mars, because he's overly emotional, and that's why he's getting himself into so much trouble. He can't control his emotions. He overreacts. Anything that strikes his emotions, he's just like, come on, no, punch in the face, right? He needs to control himself, and Saturn is all about controlling, and Saturn in Capricorn has that discipline, the control. That's why Mars is exalted in Capricorn, because Capricorn controls the Mars and keeps its energy dignified, right? It's not the type to be violent. Mars in Capricorn is a very controlled Mars. These Mars can train. they can control, they can develop themselves into a fierce, strong force or weapon or whatever, however the Mars wants to express itself, right? So if it's a fighter, it's going to be a very controlled, deadly fighter. So he needs that, and that's very good that he has that in the Draconic. Because if a Mars is in Cancer, yeah, it's violent, but it's not controlled, so it's not nearly as effective as it could be in Capricorn. Although it'll be more violent, more dangerous, more explosive, more lending itself to criminality or sexuality, all that kind of thing, right? So yeah, the Cancerian stuff is primarily why he's so violent. That's why he can't control himself. Because this Mars wants to get up and go. It's like 0 degrees Aries. It's like, let me go, right? And when he gets emotional, especially because his moon is conjunct the sun, it tends the burnout. The burnout, it causes over emotionality, revs up this Mars. It's like this is a red hot engine, and he's just like, I'm gonna punch you in the face, and he does. And still in the Draconic, Mars and Aries, very strong Mars, but definitely needs Saturnian control there. So that's good that at least he has in the Draconic, and it probably comes through more in like his ability to train. The long term, the underneath. The Draconic is not, it's not surface. It's not something that's going to come out in the heat of the moment. That's going to be the natal chart, but this is more a spirit. This is a spiritual chart. So the spirit of Saturn in Capricorn, which is really going to strengthen this Mars in Aries. And that's why the spirit of that is why he can train really hard and become very strong, very, excellent career, MC in Capricorn, religious devotion. And, that's excellent. So, alrighty, guys, I think that's it for Conor McGregor. Very fighty Irishman who's good at fighting and arguing and punching people in the nose. All right, I hope you liked it, and please hit the like button if you did. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, if you're tempted to hit the dislike button, please leave a comment. Tell me what you didn't like about it. Maybe you just don't like me and you're pissed off and want to get back at me for something I said or did. Maybe. But let me know anyway. Guys, book a reading with me. My website is macroastrology.com. My email is macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And that's it for now. Alrighty. Bye.